Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another exciting series of BWHR Voices. Today we have with us Mr. Prabir Jha, founder and CEO of Prabir Jha People Advisory. So we welcome you on board. It's a pleasure for us to be speaking with you, and I know you are already caught up amidst different things within your own realm, but then you took out time for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sugan. Always a pleasure to speak with you and to BW Business World.
Thank you so much. So, for all those who are waiting, what is our today's topic of conversation that we're going to do with Mr. Jha? It is the power of laughter in workspace, how to incorporate humor into your HR strategy within any organization, of course. So, just a small introduction of what we feel about this conversation is that, incorporating humor into the HR strategy can always be a great way, in my opinion, to foster a positive work culture, increase employee engagement, and build a stronger relationship among team members. It can, often lighten the mood as well, ease tension, and create a more relaxed and enjoyable work environment. However, it is important to approach this strategy and, in a way which is pretty appropriate, which is thoughtfully driven, because often people misunderstand, or consider as offensive humor as well, whenever we're trying to inculcate this aspect within any organization. I'll give you a small example. So I was hearing, a podcast by Ashneer Grover, wherein he categorically stated an instance that, he could not stay in an organization which he had just joined with a very handsome package because of the fact that he could not feel the usual office toxicity and the humor that, an office environment is made up of. So he said that, I joined the organization, it was his first day, and, the only thing that was missing in the organization, in the organizational realm was humor. People were working like robots. No wonder they were being paid a hefty salary. I wouldn't want to name the organization. But he said, that is something that caught my attention that, look, I cannot work in an environment wherein I cannot breathe, I cannot laugh, I cannot talk. So, from there it emerged as a concept that how important it is to have humor within your own organization as a strategy. We might as well say that. So, in your opinion, sir, why is it incorporating humor in the HR strategy important, and how can it benefit the employee morale and productivity in the workspace?
So first, Sugandh, you've made all the right noises in your introduction to the subject. So my compliments, all the right things.
Thank you, sir.
We take ourselves far more seriously than we need to. And the biggest myth going around is that, our business is serious business, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, by default, you can't laugh about it, you can't joke about it, you can't pull each other's leg about it. And it's a very deep-seated myth. And I think it's very, very outdated, especially in a world which is so brittle, anxious, incomprehensible. You have got to get people to feel easy, right? Because if people are all stiff and tense and serious, I don't think anything is going to happen. So let me just give, in addition to things that you've said, why is it not just an HR strategy? Why it should be an organizational strategy?
Exactly.
Right? Right. So one very clearly is, I think to me, it breeds the right leadership culture. And a lot of business is really about the quality of leadership and how it's perceived, not what it says, but how it's felt. Right. And I think when leaders use good humor, and you use the right caveat, it's about good humor, right?
Exactly.
And we'll talk about
shouldn't sound offensive to other. Yeah.
It shouldn't, absolutely not. And there's a huge opportunity to use good humor, right? It's not that difficult, but it projects confidence for leadership, about the leader, about his or her competence. It makes them feel more approachable, their personal likability. So, when people at the top start getting perceived that way, the trickle down starts happening. And in many, many organizations which are besieged with a sense of hierarchy, and stiff hierarchy, I think it's very, very useful to kind of use humor, to use light banter, to help people smile, to feel that their leaders are also human like you and me. I think therefore flowing from there, it builds group cohesiveness, because you're
Okay.
dealing with people, and it improves cohesiveness, which means it improves collaboration, which improves relationships. And therefore, a lot of the way when people work with each other, even laterally, not just higher and lower, I think is dramatically different. It humanizes the entire experience. It minimizes, what is called status or rank differential, which people, do many, many interventions to resolve it, but just a little bit higher humor quotient in companies can do the trick very beautifully. It also, in my view, builds appropriate citizenship behavior, right? And that impacts the quality of your workplace, the culture of the workplace, resilience of employees. You talked about stress and fatigue. Ultimately, therefore, when you build trust, you build closeness, you build approachability. Finally, what it does is it builds creativity. And one of the biggest strategic gaps I find in companies when I meet with them or I advise them is, everyone wants to just follow a SOP led process in a world which is Bani
It's
and
like a
VUCA.
checklist for them that they a
That's
mark of
right.
tokenism.
That's right. So I think you need to unleash creativity, innovation. So if you are able to actually leverage humor appropriately, I believe it improves team performance and therefore business impact. So it's a very strategic, hardcore issue. And my compliments to you for picking up subject like this, because most people don't even understand. And, in my coaching of leaders, I have told so many of them, why don't you just smile a little, right? Why don't you just smile? Forget humor, that will come later, but just smile. Everyone is so stiff. And I think you basically need to unfreeze,
Hmm.
work environments. You need to unfreeze personal relationships. A lot of interpersonal relationship is frozen because it's all logical. You said this, I will say that. Each one is playing.
Exactly.
And it happens even in our social relationships, right? So I think it's just not an HR strategy. It's actually a very deep-seated, conscious call that organizations and individuals must make. So that's why I think it's very, very important for it to become a very central part of our thinking and being in
Very
organizations.
rightly you said, sir. Shouldn't be just an HR strategy. It should be actually an organization's culture wherein you just enter and you feel that vibe of working, with pleasure and laughter. And, your
Right.
banter going on around. Your colleagues are right beside you. They're chit chatting, they're sharing their things, and, of course, giving out productivity at work as well. Now, if we think and if we map it out, it is important for in the recruitment strategy as well to have humor, because that is where, if you're employing me at your organization and you welcome me with open arms and a warm welcome, or maybe a small joke to begin with, it will make me feel at ease that this is something, or this is a place wherein I can delve deep into, I can thrive better, I can succeed, as well as I can stay for long term. So, how do you think can HR managers use humor effectively, specifically in the recruitment strategy?
So again, I will add HR and the hiring managers, because it's just
Okay.
not
Yeah.
HR which is interviewing.
Hmm.
So anyone who's interviewing, I
Exactly.
think
The TA leads
you're
and all.
absolutely right. Sharing in a lighter way what they do as a company, or what that team does, or what that individual manager does. Right? It's lovely to kind of use humor on yourself first. Right? It relaxes the candidate. It also gives people flavor of what this workplace could be like,
Right.
right? If the guy is very intense, serious, and humorless, then also is a good data point for the guy to know that this is not the workplace for me. I'm not saying that everyone will love humor equally, but for some people and some candidates, it's okay. I remember watching on Instagram or someplace, a pilot welcoming the passengers with in such an interesting and funny way. Does it make flying any less serious? Would he be trivial about it? The answer is no.
No,
But
of
it
course.
helped the passengers relax. It helped the and someone watching that reel, I loved it. So same with an interview process. Make humor something to lighten. Otherwise, what's a stressful conversation, right? Someone who's being evaluated, judge. It's not fair. Allow and ease the person to be himself or herself. So you will make a better assessment also, rather than a very practiced response. So that
And
is
the
one.
hiring manager can also make out that, they're not hiring a robot. They're hiring a
Absolutely.
lively person. It is a trait
Absolutely.
that might bring, joy within an office space. Why
So
not
well
to
said.
have?
So well said. And every candidate or every hire is an opportunity for you to bring or enhance the humor quotient in your team, right? So if you find the guy very intense and serious, I would not possibly hire. I like energy. I like a little banter. I like a little ease, with when I interview or when I've interviewed people. The second question is, the way. So, what is the approach? Introduction
Right.
to the company,
Hmm.
to the culture. It adds to the employee brand ambassadorship. It eases the person to give his or her authentic best in a conversation, which is important. It's not a faint one. But let me add to some thoughts since you asked about the recruitment process. Today there are also questionnaires which are available, validated questionnaires which can check your humor quotient. Right? There are many.
Okay.
Right? I'm not sure whether it's practiced in India as much, but otherwise there are very validated. So you can actually assess people on their humor quotient or their humor index or their humor style. You can also use, what otherwise we leverage the BEI or the behavioral event interviewing to help understand the human angle of that candidate. So let me know of a time, and when you use humor to diffuse a crisis, tell me now either the guy is scratching his or her head or the guy is actually able to say. I remember a time, when I was in college and I was going for my civil service interview by the UPSC. I don't have the time today, but they asked me, why have you not, we were talking dogs, and suddenly they asked me, why have you kept only small dogs? And I remember responding, I mean, the answer was that, ask my dad. I mean, I wasn't the one who decided on these dogs, but I said, I live in a small flat in Patna, and I'm sure you wouldn't have liked me sharing my room with another big dog. And I smiled. And the entire panel of the UPSC, which are very, very big names, started laughing. I mean, I had very high marks in my UPSC interview in any case, but I'm just saying, even as a candidate, it's not that someone is going to mind or you will look trivial, because using humor is also a sense of, can you think on your feet? Do you have presence of mind?
Exactly.
So I think when you do BEIs, you are aware for cues where the guy is using humor, where the guy is able to share anecdotes like you do for your company and your experience. You also ask the guy to share anecdotes and
Exactly.
experiences.
Yeah. This is how we keep experiences at bay also, that I'm learning something from you, you're learning something from me,
Yes.
but in
Yes.
a very humorous and a very generous manner that you
Relax.
wouldn't even
Absolutely.
realize that you're grasping something from the other person.
Correct. Absolutely. So it's a very important tool. It's a very important focus. The challenge is most managers, I believe, are lousy interviewers, and not everyone is a great hiring manager, including in HR. So it's a long way to go, but I 100% agree. Humor must be an important way, and there are different ways in which you can assess. You can use humor to sell an organization and yourself, because candidates also have a choice, and you can use various ways in which you can actually check on the humor quotient of the candidate himself or herself.
So very rightly you said that there are ways we can use humor, to have people within the organization and to inculcate a culture. Do you think it is also used to address certain serious issues within any organization? Considering, let's say, if we are discussing something about posh, or if you're discussing something about diversity and inclusion, I wouldn't say they're very strong topics, but then they're very mindful aspects when it comes to thinking, when it comes to talking about. So, in your view, can we have humor inculcated in such serious aspects as well, wherein people don't feel that we are schooling them?
Yeah.
It should feel that it is more of a a seminar, or a kind of a talk show that they're listening to, and they will grasp the essence of it.
So, Sugandh, you have to be very mindful of when to use humor and what kind of humor, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, if you're doing, let us say, a posh investigation, maybe that's
Hmm.
not the time that you need to use humor, right? Because then that's serious investigation. But if you are educating people about posh, or
Hmm.
about diversity issues, or about ethics, or about any such serious issue, risk,
Hmm.
enterprise risk, right? I mean, very heavy subjects, but you can actually use humor to lighten the environment, and yet drive a message stronger and deeper than what you would have done by using, maybe 5 minutes of extra talk time. Because,
Okay.
humor is something that drives messages home. I believe for sure that everything in life, forget organizations, is not about cold mathematical logic. And the challenge with a lot of the left brain bias of leadership and management that I see across is they have lost the sense of humor. They have lost to understand and unleash the power of humor because maybe they've never actually spent time building out that dimension in their own style of leadership, right?
Hmm.
And therefore, it's all about logic, data, etc. But humor, trust me, can deliver some very serious messages. It can actually be in my view, the best mirror, because when you share a story and someone smiles, you've got the attention, and then you ask a sharper question. So how many of us would think this never happens in our organization? This has never happened with us. So the question is powerful, but the introduction is more inviting. It's less threatening. And I think it's a very important aspect of communication style. And I believe that great leaders are people who are masters of communication style. They know what
Right.
to use to get attention. And then they weave that master sharp question that they want to talk about. So it's not a comedy show for 30 minutes or 1 hour, but it is using the odd anecdote to break monotony, to repivot human focus, to talk about something which sounds neutral and innocent, gets people to smile, and then pose the relevant question. So I think, it's something which is a very deft tool if it is practiced well and used right. But if you've done it the wrong way, then everything can go south. And that is something which I always say that humor is a learned skill. It is not that, you were born only to know. So everyone who is doing a comedy show, and we are not talking comedy shows here, so that for our audience, they are clear. We are not making light of the serious stuff that organizations are doing. We are only saying, can humor be a way which can actually help address that agenda better than the so-called perceived thing that, oh, you've got to be very serious and you've got to keep your smile absolutely sealed and camouflaged. No, it doesn't work that way, but we have to be very mindful of what humor and when and how to use that humor.
Sir, do you think while given an opportunity for employees to exercise humor in different aspects, it can also cross lines at some point in time? Because when you're joking around, when you are perceiving humor in a different aspect to it, you might cross a line. And there is a way to understand and put humor into a very serious issue. In an
Yes.
organization, an employee to another employee may mock at him or her and claim that, it was just in humor, we were joking around. But then, so we want to know from you, what is it a specific? I wouldn't say there is a rule book of how to use humor, but there should be a specific strategy or a concept in mind that why are you using humor in that place? So, do you think when we are given an open opportunity within any organization to exercise humor wherever we feel we are comfortable with, might also cross lines at some point in time?
I mean, the danger cannot be denied, right? And therefore, I
Okay,
believe this needs coaching. This needs
right.
conscious. Some people are blessed with it, not only with humor, but also how to leverage and deploy appropriate humor. So the operating word is always about appropriate.
Hmm.
It must be appropriate. So,
Right.
some things that come to my mind very clearly is, don't make your humor that you are dishing out too personal for anyone, right?
Okay.
It should not become very personal. That, Sugandh, for example, the black t-shirt that you're wearing is no, 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 no. You can't go there. It can't be Sugandh and the black t-shirt that she is wearing. So you
So you
can't
can't
make
objectify with
you
humor. There
can't.
is no
And which
objectification
is
with humor.
focused on any particular individual. If you talk about black t-shirts, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
But you can't talk about person X, right? As an example.
Hmm.
Second is, never use humor to put someone down. It's an absolute no-no. You
Okay.
never use humor to put anyone down. So that's the third part. Humor must be appropriate. It must be appropriate to the context. So that question that you asked about a posh investigation, I mean, don't use humor which otherwise would have been good in education and awareness in the time
Exactly.
when you're navigating, right? So judgment is important, must be appropriate. I also believe that you have to be very mindful about linguistic, particularly in India, I find, or even in cross-cultural realities, linguistic, religious, national, gender, these kind of a lot of stereotypes. You can use humor, but don't affix it to any such thing, because these are very sensitive. They may
Hmm.
even run risk of legal action, right? So you make it a little more open. I always feel the best joke is when you take it upon yourself, when you take it
Right.
upon upon your spouse or your family, because it's more
Exactly.
innocent, right? I was
Oh,
chatting with my
that is
spouse the
even practiced if you see in comedy shows, in stand up comedies.
yes,
The comedian
yes,
first takes the jokes, on himself or herself to make people feel comfortable that, it's not something that we're mocking at, but, it's a general observation.
correct. And when you do that, then people don't so for example, many of us watch this Shraddha, and many of her jokes on HR, and I had someone ask me that, no, is it fair, is it? I said, learn to take a joke on yourself. Only when you take a joke on yourself do you get the right to also pull someone else's leg. And the
Exactly.
challenge, we are hyper about ourselves. And to be serious about our jobs, we don't need to take ourselves more seriously than needed. But the catch line is about prudence. You must be prudent about use of humor so that there are no negative emotional or cognitive triggers that happen. That is very important. As long as you're mindful of that, I think it is perfect. To me, a sense of humor is a very integral part of getting jobs done. I think you should assess leadership and talent also on the dimension of humor. How good are they? How well do they use it? If they
Hmm.
if they are good at it but they are using it wrong here and there, coach them. Because don't throw the baby out with the bath water. And as I said, it's a learned skill. So it is a great instrument for inclusion, and and can be very respectful. But you have to be very mindful that you don't personalize, you don't put people down and stuff that I said.
So while I feel it is important as a trait within an employee, in the hiring strategy that, what kind of humor the person is bringing on table, or what, or how jovial the person is. But, in organizations, it is sometimes also misunderstood to a level wherein, you rightly said where to use humor and when to use it. And an employer might have this preconceived notion that because that person is so jovial and so lively at work, keeps laughing, keeps people at bay, may not understand the nitty gritty of the subject. Considering that, I've been tagged as a person who's jovial. So then I'm also given a tag automatically that, I do not understand serious issues. And they might have this preconceived notion that, the person will take this aspect also in joke. So, how to deal in such situations? Your jovial personality sometimes backfires at you as well.
So, it's just not about laughter or humor. Some people can appear to be callous, to be easy. And again, these are stereotypes. If just because the guy looks, fun and is pulling people's leg, he is not, or she is not serious about their job. It's a myth, right?
Yeah.
But there are people who can actually be callous. There are people who can appear to be just faffing around. Now, that's not good for your personal reputation. To me, strategically, you must have enough repertoire of humor in yourself that that if you are in a very high debate meeting and general emotions are rising, you should be able to diffuse that by using appropriate humor. You should be able to use humor as an influencing style and technique. So see, anything overdone becomes dysfunctional. So if
Right.
you think that it is your reputation of humor here, there, and everywhere is making you appear light, then don't be foolish about it. See, humor must be used more like a shock weapon, not a stock weapon. Because if you use it as a stock weapon, everyone will think, oh, take him lightly, take him lightly, take him
Hmm.
lightly. But if you use it sparingly but very, very sharply, you will you will influence better. You will be found more approachable. You will be able to reconcile differences a lot better. You will be able to take a joke on yourself. So then you have get the right to pull someone else's leg. So I think being mindful of the reputation that you're creating is important. Don't become a jackass, because jackasses are not taken seriously at all. But
Exactly.
the point that I think this conversation is actually helping put forth is, at least realize the power, the strategic value of having a higher humor quotient, and learn when and how to deploy it to its maximum effect, so that it helps you, the agenda, and the larger good of the organization.
Well, sir, I believe we've covered, extensively on this aspect in a very generous as well as humorous manner with your anecdotes and analysis. If you were to share key takeaways from this session, let's say five, what would that be?
See, for me, I think, I'll use a little expression. It's called the pratfall effect.
Okay.
The pratfall effect, I think, is the most important takeaway of this conversation. It summarizes everything.
Okay.
Pratfall effect is basically a psychological phenomenon wherein people feel a little wary of others who look too good, too perfect, right?
Okay. Okay.
So lack of humor is typically seen as very pristine. I'm perfect. I'm so logical. I'm correct. I am
Hmm.
analytical. I am very focused on the task. I don't even ask about your dog or about, anything else. I'm very
Very
focused.
to the point.
The point. So pratfall effect says that actually it's one of the biggest myths of organizations. Normal, hardworking people like you and me like to work with people and enjoy working with people
Right.
who are able to laugh sometimes, who are able to be vulnerable sometimes, who are able to take a joke on oneself, including senior people, right? And that, releases the right endorphins, the right hormones, the right dopamine, which actually creates a sense of joy, love, high. And that is what gets people to enjoy working or being with some people, right? And therefore, if you're just aware that, is your organization suffering from pratfall effect, or am I as an individual creating a pratfall effect? Learn to unfreeze, learn to be more human, learn to take a joke, learn to get your leg pulled. Don't take yourself more seriously. If someone pulls your leg, laugh. Learn to pull a leg back, and you will start unfreezing your ecosystem and
Right.
get more creativity, more joy, more effect. And that's what really makes a winning workplace at some level or the other. So that's really what I would summarize as a takeaway.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure speaking with you, hearing the anecdotes and the analysis that you have, with an excellent example, of course, always. So, you always understand the nitty gritty of the topic and you bring out relevant examples to it. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It was a pleasure speaking with you. People who have questions in this regard, you're free to, tag sir on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. Ask him questions there. He'll be happy to respond. I see him more responsive on LinkedIn. So, preferably, LinkedIn is a better source when it comes to
I'm
talking
there on
to.
all platforms, and I respond wherever people ask me questions. So
No,
thank you
that's a,
so much.
that's
Thank you so much for inviting me, and a very interesting subject. And I'd love to see comments and reactions of people. You take
sure,
care.
sir. They'll be flooded, I'm sure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Bye
so
bye.
much, sir. It was a pleasure. Thank you, sir.